The world woke up to a shock, one no analyst, no strategist, and certainly no American official ever saw coming. U.S. ports in chaos. Container backlogs stretching miles into the sea. Shipping giants issuing emergency rerouting notices. American consumers facing the worst delays since World War II. And at the epicenter of this unexpected turmoil, not China, not Russia, not the Middle East, but South Africa, a nation the United States underestimated for far too long. In a dramatic geopolitical turn, South Africa launched a strategic retaliation that sent shockwaves through America's logistics system, triggering what experts are calling fire, the largest supply chain shock to hit U.S. ports in modern history. But what really happened? How did South Africa, often dismissed by American policymakers, hit the United States exactly where it hurts? And why does this moment mark a turning point for Africa's rising global power? Welcome to another explosive deep dive from Eazicho Africa, where we break down the stories the world refuses to explain. Let's get into it. For decades, Washington viewed South Africa through a narrow lens. A partner in trade, a regional leader, a diplomatic voice, but not a threat, not a challenger, not a nation capable of shaking America's most vulnerable economic pillar, its supply chains. Yet beneath the surface, South Africa has undergone a transformation so profound that the U.S. foreign policy machine failed to take it seriously. Here's what they missed. Durban, Nkura, Cape Town, Richards Bay. These ports have quietly become the nerve centers of Southern Hemisphere shipping. Billions in upgrades. New alliances with Asia and the BRICS bloc. Unprecedented influence over shipping lanes stretching across the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. South Africa wasn't just a member. It was an architect of the expansion. BRICS Plus has grown into a geopolitical counterweight capable of coordinating energy routes, mineral exports, shipping corridors, port regulations, global trade norms. This mattered more than the U.S. ever admitted. While Americans debate foreign policy on TV, their economy runs on something few citizens ever think about: critical imports, metals, machinery, fertilizers, agricultural inputs, rare minerals, and industrial components, many of which move through African supply chains. And South Africa sits at the center of them. Washington never connected the dots until it was too late. Every geopolitical retaliation has a spark, a moment where diplomacy collapses and frustration turns into action. In this hypothetical scenario, that spark was simple. America sanctioned key South African entities, accusing them of dealing too closely with BRICS energy networks and violating trade alignment with the West. Washington expected compliance, but South Africa had changed. The government, backed by a rising sense of continental unity, issued a warning. Any attempt to destabilize our sovereignty will be met with proportional response. The U.S. ignored the warning. And in the world of global trade, proportional response can mean many things. In South Africa's case, it meant something America never anticipated: a coordinated restriction on U.S.-bound cargo routes. Not a blockade, not an embargo, nothing illegal or dramatic, just a strategic slowdown, a recalibration of outbound cargo, a reshuffling of shipping priorities, a rerouting of key minerals and industrial goods away from the United States and toward India, China, and BRICS-friendly nations. Washington didn't take it seriously, but the shipping world did. At first, it was just one port, Los Angeles, reporting minor delays. Then it became Long Beach, Savannah, Houston, New York/New Jersey within days. The entire U.S. port network was strained to breaking point. Why? Because global trade isn't a simple chain. It's a web, and one thread pulled in Cape Town can snap another in California. Without the steady flow of containers from South African-linked routes, U.S. ports suddenly lacked thousands of units needed for domestic exports. American farmers, car manufacturers, and tech exporters were stranded. Cargo bound for the U.S. from Asia normally transits through southern shipping lanes that rely on African port sequencing. South Africa's recalibration disrupted that sequencing. Ports backed up, shipping times tripled. Platinum group metals, crucial for catalytic converters, electronics, aerospace, and industrial machinery, were rerouted to Asia. U.S. automakers froze production lines. South Africa is a key node for fertilizer components from the SADC region. The U.S. agricultural belt got hit with shortages at the worst possible time. Liquefied petroleum shipments transiting South African waters moved toward BRICS plus nations instead of U.S. markets. Gas prices surged. Suddenly, America realized something. South Africa had more leverage than Washington ever acknowledged. Within a week, the U.S. media, normally slow to cover African geopolitics, entered full panic mode. CNN. Unexpected global disruption crashes supply chains. Experts baffled. Fox News. Why did we ignore Africa's growing power? MSNBC. U.S. ports overwhelmed. A crisis nobody predicted. The irony? African analysts had been predicting this shift for years. Washington simply refused to listen. To understand how South Africa could trigger this level of chaos, you must understand BRICS Maritime Strategy 2030, a long-term plan that was quietly developed and strengthened through multiple BRICS summits. The plan includes shared shipping insurance, interport cooperation, cargo harmonization, alternative payment systems, shared logistics platforms, mineral prioritization within the bloc. This created something the West never anticipated. Fire a multipolar shipping system that does not rely on U.S. approval. South Africa's leverage comes from its geography. Gateway to the Cape of Good Hope shipping corridor. Control over Southern Atlantic and Indian Ocean junctions. Deepwater ports used by global shipping giants. Anchor of the SADC shipping network. When South Africa shifts its policies, it doesn't just affect African trade. It affects global trade. And in this hypothetical scenario, it left Washington scrambling. Factories relying on South African-linked metals, chemicals, or machine components started collapsing into backlogs. Detroit automakers were especially hit. The U.S. farming industry relies heavily on nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium shipments connected to African maritime routes. Shortages led to soaring fertilizer prices. Consumer goods imported through African-sequenced global routes disappeared from shelves. Walmart, Target, Costco, they all felt it. African energy exports being rerouted to BRICS markets meant less available supply for America. The ripple effect hit transportation, logistics, aviation, household energy bills. Just as America believed inflation had been tamed, supply chain chaos pushed prices upward again. The Federal Reserve panicked. Analysts panicked. Consumers panicked. But South Africa? It stood firm. Africa applauded. Across the continent, analysts celebrated South Africa's ability to flex geopolitical muscle. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't warfare. It was strategic sovereignty. Asia aligned. China, India, and other BRICS nations supported South Africa's move, benefiting from rerouted shipments and strengthened trade ties. Europe panicked. With energy shortages and manufacturing slowdowns of their own, Europeans realized the U.S. was dragging them into unnecessary geopolitical conflict. Latin America observed closely. Brazil quietly supported the shift, seeing the opportunity to join South Africa in reshaping global trade. When the U.S. finally understood the scale of the problem, it scrambled into action. Emergency delegations, diplomatic appeals, pressure on shipping companies, negotiations with BRICS leaders, internal debates over reversing sanctions. But Washington faced one fundamental challenge. South Africa wasn't isolated. It was backed by BRICS, SAC, African Union Logistics Systems, new Asian and Middle Eastern partners. For the first time in decades, the U.S. discovered something uncomfortable. Fire Africa has options, and they no longer run through Washington. South Africa's retaliation was not about revenge. It wasn't about conflict. It wasn't about crippling America. It was a message. Respect our sovereignty. Respect Africa's rising power. Respect a multipolar world. For too long, major powers treated African nations as silent participants in global trade. But this moment, this hypothetical scenario, illustrates the truth. Fire Africa holds real leverage in global supply chains. Fire South Africa is no longer a passive actor. Fire BRICS has rebalanced world power. This crisis changed everything. No longer sidelined. No longer underestimated. Ignoring African partners came with a price. Coordinated shipping strategies outmaneuver Western dominance. Wars are no longer fought with weapons, but with cargo, routes, minerals, and logistics. Whether this is a hypothetical scenario or a future possibility, the message remains clear. Africa is rising. South Africa is rising, and the world must adjust. The United States can no longer assume global control over supply chains. It can no longer bully nations into alignment, and it can no longer underestimate African economic power. In this story, South Africa didn't fire a single bullet, yet it delivered one of the most powerful geopolitical lessons of the century. Fire trade routes are power. Ports are power. Africa is power. And if the world continues to overlook the continent's strategic importance, it will face even greater shocks than this imagined supply chain crisis. This has been Ezecho Africa, bringing you the stories they don't want you to hear, the stories that reshape global power, and the stories that prove Africa's rising dominance. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe for more explosive geopolitical content. Africa is rising, and we're here to tell the world.